3, 2, 1.
Welcome to today's episode of the PolitiPop podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. Today's episode is our third in our Class Warfare Trilogy, brought on by the hardships of the COVID-19 pandemic and quarantine, lockdown, shelter in place, whatever you want to call them. Today's episode is about the movie Snowpiercer. And reviewing this movie with me, delving into it, reading between the lines, is my favorite co-host, I'll say it, Ty. Welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Damn it, I didn't want to ask you how you were doing because
no one's doing good anymore.
It's tough to have a good answer, you know what I mean? But
yeah, I want to see the guy who's like, I'm doing great. I'm having an amazing time right now.
Living my best life. Awesome. So anyway, welcome back, Ty. I have 3 questions for you. We're going to get to know you a little better. First question is, what is the last movie you watched?
To completion, or because I started Battle Angel Alita last night, but I fell asleep.
Then tell me that one. How was the beginning?
Boring. I fell asleep like 20 minutes in.
All right.
The CGI is really weird.
Is it? It looks very CGI heavy.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right. So we'll wait until you finish it to determine if it's as good as the manga or not.
That's fair.
All right. What is the last video game you played?
After Party.
What's that?
Basically, it's a game about 2 friends who have just graduated college. They're at a party and they find out they're actually in hell. And they don't know how they died or what they did wrong, but they have to go through hell talking to different demons, figuring out how they got there and why. The dialogue is very clever and fun. It's a weird game. You kind of do puzzles and you have different dialogue choices, but it's very well written.
Seems like something you would download on Steam.
Maybe, yeah. I got it on Xbox Game Pass, so.
Get out of here. Really? It's an Xbox game?
Yeah, it's on everything.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right. And last question. What is the last Facebook argument you had?
The last Facebook argument I had was with a guy who commented that we're not relying on immigrants in agriculture because only about 2% of them are immigrants now. To which I went to government websites to prove him wrong and show that's actually very, very inaccurate. And his response was, well, then I guess we need to round them up.
Oh, okay then. And that was it. He had nothing to say about the fact that he was wrong.
That's it. He had nothing else to say. Even with government websites breaking it down for him, that was his answer. So I definitely won that argument. It would have felt better if he was like, hey, maybe you're right. We are relying on immigrants to help us right now more than ever. That would have been the win, but that's not what happened. He obviously didn't care.
Well, I'll tell you what I do care about. I care about today's movie. This is probably the movie that sparked this trilogy, right?
Definitely. Yeah, we had to do this one.
Yeah, and we were leading up to Snowpiercer. We've been talking it up the entire time, and now we're going to get into it. This was a 2014 film directed by Bong Joon Ho, who would later go on to direct Parasite, which won Best Picture in 2019.
That's correct, yeah. And I feel like this movie actually did really well critically, but not a lot of people saw it, which is a shame.
That's exactly the case. So, Ty, without further ado, how about you take us into the plot? What is this movie about?
Absolutely. Snowpiercer is about a future where a failed climate change experiment has killed off all life except for the lucky few who boarded the Snowpiercer, a train that travels around the globe. A new class system emerges.
We find out pretty early on that within this class system, there's the tail enders who are like the lowest of the low class, and then as you go further up the train, you get to the higher class people, the haves as opposed to the have-nots.
Yeah, the 1%.
Now, I have a question for you. in your opinion, is this Snowpiercer setup more fair than the setup of the hole in the platform?
That's a tough call. In some regards, yes. I mean, everyone's guaranteed food, so there's that. But at the same time, I think the platform is fair because everyone switches spots. So you get, it gives everyone an opportunity to see what it's like to be at the front and to be at the bottom, the top and the bottom. Whereas in Snowpiercer, if you're at the back, you're at the back, and you're never leaving there
For forever.
Forever. That's your life. You're at the back of the train.
I know. I was thinking about that too. Honestly, I asked you the answer because I couldn't come up with a clear one either. Because platform does give you a chance to live well, but it also gives you a chance to have absolutely nothing and die.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the platform was all about, trying to break that cycle, and no one wanted to. Snowpiercer, you don't even get a chance to break the cycle. You're just stuck in it. You had no choice.
So as we begin this movie, we find out, like you said, that there was a climate change experiment gone wrong, that they actually had to acknowledge climate change, which was nice because there's still so many people who don't in our real life. But we see that their whole experiment was to cool down the ozone layer. But in doing so, they brought about the next ice age, hopped on this train, and never looked back.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They released like a chemical into the atmosphere to help stop climate change. And it basically froze over the earth, created a new ice age, and everyone is dead except for whoever boarded this special train, this magic train here.
And it's interesting how later on we find out that there is some of the snow outside melting, that it's actually changing.
Yeah, that's basically the big moment of the film, I guess, is finding out that the earth is starting to warm up again and the snow is melting, but nobody on the train believes this. Nobody thinks it's ever going to happen, that you can survive out there again.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of now how in some ways the earth is healing itself, right? You see like all those "we are the virus" takes.
Yeah, I mean, you can see like there's pictures of California where you can see the smog over it, over LA. And then you, like, right before the whole quarantine, and then you look now, and it's almost gone. Like, you can see the city clearly.
That is so wild. I mean, there are, like, fake articles going around, which is really funny.
Of course.
Like, dolphins are returning to Venice, and there's elephants in China that are getting drunk off of corn wine and passing out, which National Geographic proved to not be true. But still, there are a lot of benefits to the ozone layer right now, to our air quality, that pollution has dropped tremendously with just a month of not as many people going out in their cars.
Yeah, it's incredible. I feel like people always felt, even myself, it was kind of like a losing battle. Or there's no way we could save the earth unless there was something completely crazy, like releasing a chemical in the atmosphere. But it goes to show if we actually took the steps, maybe we could help the planet.
It's so funny too how there's it honestly isn't even that drastic of a move that we've taken in real life, right? Like, it's just been about a month of people not going out as much.
And I mean, people are still people who work are still driving. There's still cars on the road, but just cutting down on the amount. A lot of the factories aren't working. It's really something amazing to see.
And to see that it's happening so quick, because there's the alternate viewpoint. Usually I see people use the George Carlin argument against climate change. He has this whole set about like, oh, well, the earth has been around for however many millions of years, but you seem to think that 100 years of industry is going to kill the earth. That's ridiculous, blah, blah, blah. And they keep using that. And it's such an ass backwards argument too.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure the earth will survive, but if they have to send us into, I don't know, an ice age to kill off all life, then that's what it'll do. So, it's more of a, are we going to save our own species? But
yeah,
people
are we
don't
going
seem
to
realize that. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, just nobody uses that with their own health, right? It's like, well, I've been alive for 60 years. You can't tell me that 1 year of crack addiction isn't going to hurt, you can't tell me that 1 year of crack addiction is going to hurt my body that badly.
Yeah,
like, that's the exact same thing. And yet, right now, right, just a month of people not going out as much has reversed air pollution. Not reversed it, but dropped it dramatically.
Absolutely. But, you're still going to have the deniers and the people who don't want to accept that. So it's an impossible battle.
Now, despite being made in 2014, this movie is oddly prescient with the quarantine going on right now. That there's this moment where they send the soldiers into the back of the train to find artists. They're like, all right, up front, they want someone who plays violin. Because even no matter how well they're living up at the front of the train, they still need to escape the fact that they're on a train in the end of the world and they can't do anything else with their lives. So they need music, they need art, and that's something that's happening right now, too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people have nothing to do at home, so what are they doing? They're watching movies, playing video games, reading, just going to the arts because it's all they have.
Apparently, internet usage has gone up 70% and streaming has gone up more than 12%. This was back in March, too. I can only imagine how much it's gone up since then.
Yeah, it's crazy. They were saying that Netflix was going to have to stop streaming in HD because of the strain on them.
Get out of here.
Yeah, they wouldn't be able to actually, provide HD streaming to everyone. So it's either like you go back to standard definition or they're going to have to like shut off the service. So I don't know if they wound up doing that in America, but I know they were doing it in certain countries. But yeah, it's pretty wild just showing how many people are relying on these services.
Wow.
Amazon is, another one that maybe not entertainment wise, but Amazon's making a ton of money right now because people aren't going out to the stores. So like people are relying on these services more heavily than they ever have before.
Another thing people turn to in this movie is the drug Chronol, which they explain exactly what it is.
So Chronol, you like scratch and sniff it like a scratch and sniff sticker. It's pretty odd, but it gives you hallucinations. And it seems like everyone in the front of the train, almost everybody seems to use it.
Yeah, it seems to be happening a lot now, too, right? Like, essential businesses are keeping open. And apparently among those essential businesses are liquor stores.
Yeah, exactly.
I know a lot of people have just been getting stoned, like, every day because there's really nothing else to do.
Yeah, you're just trying to find something to pass the time and make it not so depressing.
Yeah, and while it hasn't been every day, I've definitely been smoking and eating a lot more weed than I normally would.
Yeah.
However, it has led me to be a lot more creative. So
hey, there you go.
So that's interesting, and maybe it's something that can speak to the narrative in the film that the people who are known as the Chronol users, they're the ones who are kind of thinking way differently than the tail enders, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
like
definitely a difference there.
Yeah, like Min Soo's character, he's one of them. Speaking of Min Soo, let's talk about the cast real quick of this film because it is so diverse. Yeah,
it really is. There's pretty much every character is portrayed, by a different race or type of person. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, we have in the lead Curtis. We have Chris Evans, Captain America himself, and then the guy who is really good at the gates, opening them on the train. Min Soo, he's played by Kang Ho Song, who we'll see later on in Parasite.
Yeah,
he plays the father of the poor family. We also see Ed Harris. I didn't know this was Tilda Swinton.
Yeah, it was. She wow.
I know, Tilda Swinton in her best Austin Powers cosplay.
Yeah, she's pretty bizarre in it, but excellent.
I know. She really is. And of course, Octavia Spencer. So there are a lot of different ethnicities represented in this movie, and it's directed by a Korean director. This film itself is in English, however.
It's based on a Korean comic book, right?
It's actually a French graphic novel, it turns out.
Wow.
So it's a French graphic novel adapted to film by a Korean director starring American actors and Korean actors alike, in which all of the heroes turn out to be white. So it kind of is.
What would you say they're heroes?
It's not all the heroes. Or
I would disagree. I'd say all the villains are white.
What about the protagonists? Are we saying heroes are protagonists?
No, you're talking about Curtis, right?
Yeah.
Curtis is a bad person.
What? All right, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait. So as we keep going through this, hold that viewpoint and prove me wrong. All right. So yeah, we do talk about the leader who, Curtis, he's this rugged, have a beard, dude that everybody looks up to in the back of the train. He's one of the tail enders. Yeah,
in the beginning, he's very, he's kind of charismatic. He's the one who always jumps in first. He's the one that is willing to step up when no one else will.
which makes him a leader, which makes him someone people turn to, even if he wants to be a leader or not. That doesn't matter. They're looking toward him.
Yeah, he doesn't view himself as a leader, which I thought was great. It's always the people who don't want that usually are the best at it.
Yeah, he's the Jon Snowpiercer.
Yeah, exactly. He's the Jon Snowpiercer. He definitely does not want it. But Edgar, he's kind of like sidekick, and everyone else is kind of like, oh, you're our leader. What do we do next? What's the plan? And they always look to him for it.
Now things kind of get kicked off when the people from the front of the train, they send their guards to get children from the back. And it seems to be that the children are the ones who really suffer in this world, because on a few levels, they have never known the world before the Snowpiercer.
Yeah, this is the only life they've known. Even most of the characters, they really don't have too many memories from beforehand, unless you're like in your 30s or over. I think Curtis is 34, and he remembers life beforehand. But
yeah,
most
he was
people
like
don't.
17 years old when this happened.
Yeah,
when the world ended, pretty much.
He was barely a man himself.
And we see this in real life, which is interesting, how there are older voters who just continually throw the younger generations under the bus. And it seems to be the case in Snowpiercer as well, that not only do they get the displeasure of not knowing the world beforehand, but they're brought up to the front of the train for reasons we don't know.
Yeah, obviously there's something vital about them. They measure them, right? They have a tape measure. They're checking their arm length, their leg length, and you don't really understand why. And they're picking very specific children.
Yeah, it's weird, and that's kind of what starts catalyzing the revolt that's going to take place, which is the whole plot point of the movie. They've been planning it for a little while, but when they start coming back and taking more kids and people start getting rambunctious, this is kind of what sparks that flame that's going to carry the revolt. We see the guy throw a shoe at Mason, Tilda Swinton's character.
When they take his son, yeah, he wants his son back, so he throws his shoe, and they punish him so severely for it.
What do they do to him?
They basically have these little holes in the wall that they're able to open in the train, and they stick his arm out there and they freeze it in the ice in the snow, and then they smash it with a mallet.
And that is such a disproportionate response to him throwing a shoe at
I know,
someone.
they should have taken his leg.
Why should they have taken his leg?
Because it was a shoe. No, they shouldn't have done any of that.
If he threw a glove, then they would have taken
yeah,
his arm, right?
exactly. No, but I mean, it's just so brutal. It's like, how much damage could he really do with a shoe? It's kind of like you see in Israel, right? When protesters there throw rocks and stones, and the army there, they come out with guns and brutally murder protesters. It just seems so one-sided, and that's kind of how it feels here.
What a great point. That's not something I even thought of either, because I was thinking just in terms of how it might be related to what's going on in America, but you're absolutely right. That is what's happening in Israel, when children on the Palestinian side are being sniped because they threw a rock.
Yeah, it's just like, how is this the right treatment, the fair, equal treatment, the punishment? It just doesn't seem fair at all.
And when they're punishing him, the Mason, she shows that the shoe is actually a sign of disorder. And it's just so backwards how she's like, this is a sign of violence and this is a sign of disorder, so we got to take the arm. You guys have to be fine where you are, and that's it. And this kind of reminded me of basically any protest in the United States before this last week, right? Like we had the Black Lives Matter protest, or when Antifa comes and starts shattering windows to chain businesses, and people are like, oh, this is violence, this is terrible. But meanwhile, they won't give a shit about why they were protesting, right? That an unarmed black person was shot, so there's a bunch of people out in the streets being upset about it. And they're like, oh, this is violence. They're out there yelling. Or
it's less about the people. It seems like they don't really care about the people or the reason. It's like keeping everyone in their preordained position, right? Like they can't have anything like rocking the boat or rocking the train, I guess, in this case, and like changing the order of anything. So they have to keep things very tight. And this is like how everything's going to be. And you can't do anything to get out of that.
And there's clearly just a disproportionate response that it reminds me of Charlottesville too, right? You had the Proud Boys and the alt-right coming out, and then you had the anti-protesters who were there. And when Heather Heyer was killed by a Nazi with his car, Trump just said, listen, there's bad people on both sides. Like, these are both the same thing. People yelling and people hitting people with their cars are both the same thing.
Yeah, it's just such a crazy viewpoint, and I mean that's clearly what's going on here in the film.
It's wild how this film was made in what, like 2013, and yet it still applies to things that would happen years later.
But you know what? I think these things have been happening. You know, I'd read that Bong Joon Ho wanted to set the movie in 2014 as well because climate change was happening now, and he wanted people to realize this isn't the future. You know, that this is going to happen. It's already happening, and this is where we're going to wind up, more or less, you know, in a way, if we don't prevent it. And I think, you know, he wanted this movie to be very topical for many years to come, and when he made it.
And he definitely succeeded in doing that.
Absolutely. I think you watch this back then, you watch it now, probably years from now, it'll still hold up, and I think it's both inspiring and defeating to watch.
It really is. Another thing that he probably couldn't have predicted, but is happening now, is that oil barrels have just dropped into negative prices. Did you see that?
I did, yeah.
Which is wild, but they happen to use oil drums in the movie too.
Yeah, they do.
They use them to make, I want to say it's a battering ram, but it's actually made just to hold open the gates so they could get further up in the trains.
Yeah, basically they lock all the people in the back by different doors, and each section of the train has different people in it, different purposes, and you have to have like a master key. So when they do this revolt, they use those to hold the doors open, so that Curtis can get as far up as he can and try to get them, you know, to the front of the train.
Oh, which was so awesome, this moment too. Like this, oh man, if this doesn't just get your blood flowing, I don't know what does, right?
Oh, it's great. And I mean, they've done rebellions before, right? They mentioned in the film, like they've tried to rebel and it never works out. But Curtis says this time, we're taking the engine. Like, we're going to the front. That's how we win this. So he's like, we're not stopping until we get all the way up there.
And so they have this awesome moment. It's like so tense where everyone has to line up basically in waves, and the guards come and count them. And just before this, Curtis theorizes that the guards don't have any bullets because they use them in all their previous uprisings. They used it to counter those revolts. So now they have nothing, and it's a chance to take. They're not really sure, and so like they're counting all these people and sitting down as each one goes by, and like basically they're about to find out that there's this huge battering ram that's meant to keep the doors open. And so Curtis just takes this chance and goes right up to the guard, puts the gun to his head. He pulls the trigger and it just clicks. Nothing happens. And Edgar's like, they have no bullets. Oh my God.
That's
how cool
epic.
is that?
Yeah. And it's like that moment where Curtis proves again, like why he's the leader. You know, he's the first one up there. He's willing to put the gun to his head and pull the trigger, you know, and I think everyone seeing that is so inspired. Like, this is the moment. Like, this is where we take back our life.
Yeah. And I think because Curtis kind of sees the future too, that like, you shouldn't believe in a person, you should believe in the movement. Because even if Curtis did get his brains blown out, then he trusted that the movement would still survive.
Exactly. And that's so important to the world we live in right now. You know, you look at Bernie Sanders, right? For example, like so many people, myself included, really put themselves out there for him, believing that he was going to be the one to get us over the finish line, so to speak, and like really bring socialism to the United States in a way that we needed, you know, whether it's healthcare for all and all those things. And he was unfortunately defeated by the DNC, and he kind of gave in. You know, he's endorsed Joe Biden, and the movement in a lot of ways feels dead because we relied on one man, where I think we need to find a way to not rely on one leader and just keep pushing forward.
And we will find a lot of moments in this film where there are Bernie comparisons to be made, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, they end up finding this guy named Min Soo, and he designed the gates in the train. Is that what he was there for?
I think so. Yeah, he was in the prison section. So they needed to get to the prison section and break him out.
So when they do, they decide that they're going to use him to open the gates in the train and make their way forward. Now, he is... This moment is interesting because he ends up smoking a cigarette, which are believed to be extinct. And it comes back later. This little boy, his name is Chan, he takes the matches from this guy. And Curtis is just kind of like, he's like, hey, get out of here. Like, you shouldn't be up here. And that's it. Now, I'm not sure if this is part of the plan. We'll find out later why it might have been. But it seems like he's just like, all right, like, get out of here, go be safe or whatever. And we do find another young person later on who, she's not as young as Chan. She's like, I think 17 years old.
Yeah, I think she's the age when Curtis got there, right? She's the same age he was.
Exactly. Her name is Yona, and Min Soo is kind of the person who's looking after her. And Curtis takes note that she seems to be able to see what's going on through the gates before the gates open.
Yeah, I think he even asks her if she's clairvoyant at one point, which she doesn't even know what that means. But yeah, she always seems to know what's on the other side.
And I think Curtis shows real great decision-making here when he decides to trust her, even though he can't see what's on the other side. He trusts that somebody who's younger than him can. He doesn't deny what she can do. He's able to put that skill to good use.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not going to say, you know what, I know better. Get out of the way. No, he's going to utilize that as part of the movement.
And we'll see it in this movie at that moment, but also later on, the same thing we've seen in The Platform and in Parasite, that it really does kind of come to the younger generation. They're the ones that we have to trust and believe in to help really affect change.
Yeah, exactly.
And with her skill and with Min Soo's skill, they're able to make their way up to the car where they make the food for the Tailenders. Now, we haven't spoken about the food that the Tailenders eat up until now. What do they eat to maintain their sustenance?
So what they think it is, or it's basically these black slabs, right? It's almost like a gelatin looking thing, like a bar, right? So that's all they get. They get these really gross looking bars, and they eat them. They chow them down. They get to where the food's being made, and Curtis looks into the machine and he sees, I think it's cockroaches, right? They're grinding up cockroaches and putting them into these bars. So that's the protein of the future, right? That's what they're eating. And he's so disgusted. He's like, we've been eating this shit. He doesn't want anyone else to know, because he's like, oh man, they're going to be, it's so disgusting. This is horrible. This is what they've been feeding us. And they know at the front they have steak. They have all kinds of food. They mentioned that earlier in the film, like, oh man, I wish I could have a steak. I wish I could eat something really good. Because in the front of the train, they get all the good food. But in the back, they're eating cockroaches.
And what a heart-wrenching moment that is too, because when Curtis looks in, it's him and it's the guy who has been drawing all of the history of the train.
Yeah.
Once again, an artist.
Yeah, and what does he ask him? He asks him not to draw it, right? He tells him, please don't draw this.
Do you think that's a good idea or a bad idea?
It's hard to tell. There's that idea that you have to be honest with everyone all the time. Maybe it's the best thing, but at the same time, I know he's afraid of defeating the people. What if they lose? What if they don't make it through this? And that's what gets back to the people still in the back of the train. Will they want to eat that anymore? And, we'll find out later. Curtis has seen the worst that can happen. And, as bad as this is, it was worse at one point.
Oh, that's so true. Now, I didn't really come to a conclusion either. Like, is it better to not know? I think that my interpretation of this moment might help your argument that Curtis is not a hero, because this kind of reminds me of the revisionist history that we see. The victors write history, and I think it's because people don't know exactly what happened in the past. That's why they're so vehement about getting back to it, right? You see so many people who are like, oh, well, let's just go back to the good old days. Let's make America great again, where, we were able to say whatever we want and do whatever we wanted. And I think it's because people don't remember that, like, that there was segregation. The Little Rock Nine was having acid thrown in their faces when they were trying to integrate schools. People aren't made aware of what really happened to the indigenous tribes in America, to the point that now they're upset that Land O'Lakes is removing the native lady from their logo.
Listen, they say ignorance is bliss, right? And I mean, on a personal note, if I look back at myself 10 years ago, I think I was a happier person. But someone who was not educated at all in the world and didn't really understand how the government works, how history worked, anything really. I feel like I know a lot more now, but it can be kind of depressing, and I think people don't want that. They just want to be happy and believe everything can be okay.
I mean, at least you have an excuse. There are people still to this day who are like, let's bring back everything from the Civil War, because what a time that was when the South rose up and all this other stuff. It's like, motherfucker, how many Americans died in that war?
Yeah, I mean, really, it's all about, putting America first, right? They worship the government, but they were rebels, man. They were freaking rebels. They didn't want to listen to the president, to the laws of the world, right? So they decided they were gonna break away and do their own thing.
Which we have a lot of selective people who like to think the same, right? That they're like, oh, well, we're not listening to what the government tells us. Let's not stay indoors. Let's protest all the lockdown orders. But they're not protesting Trump's handling of the situation. They're protesting their local governors who are trying to keep them safe.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. It's not that protest isn't okay. It's not that you should listen to everything your government does.
We're a country built on protest.
We are. It's just choosing what you're going to protest. And you see, like, Occupy Wall Street was shut down so quickly, And then you see something like this where people are out in the street with this virus and they're protesting, and there's no consequences, right? They're just allowed to do it. And I mean, if you can't tell that, what's right and wrong here just from that alone, I don't know what you can tell is right and wrong.
The way I looked at it was that if you are not aware of how bad things have been, you're more likely to let it get that bad again.
Yeah, definitely.
And I you're absolutely right. If knowing that you've been eating cockroach gelatin bars might defeat them. But I think also if they knew, they would be like, these sons of bitches at the front of the train have been doing this to us while they eat steak. Like, let's get them. Like, I think it might be a rallying cry. It might be what catalyzes them to be like, all right, we're not failing this protest. It could go either way. You never really know.
It might be. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Curtis makes a lot of good choices. And that may be one of the ones that isn't so good. But, it's the one that he makes.
Now, his next choice leads them to the train where I call them the Axemen.
The Axemen.
There are a bunch of soldiers there who all they have are axes, because we've seen by this point that the guards don't actually have bullets. Now, their costume choice I found very interesting, and we see that the masks that are covering their faces only have their noses and mouths showing. Which is funny because we're kind of in the opposite place right now.
We are.
That's the one thing we can't show. But they're not even showing their eyes. It's like a ski mask with the eyes covered. And to me, I felt like that was because they're blindly following orders.
Yeah, that could very well be it. Yep. I don't think they really understand why they're doing it. They're just being told to do it, so they're going to. Because they're putting themselves in the front line too, right? Like they're going to be fighting. Yes, they have axes, but the people from the back are going to fight back too. They have weapons as well, and it's going to be, a bloodbath from both sides.
And we see who's really suffering. It is the people who are fighting. Meanwhile, like the leaders who are there, Tilda Swinton's character, Mason, and one of the generals, like they're fine with pushing other people to do their fighting for them, pushing them to the death, but they don't want to die themselves.
Yeah, exactly. They're just, hey, go ahead, go do this. Take care of this for us. And Yona, right, she actually tries to warn them that she knows it's on the other side. So she does hear this coming. She hears them on the other side and tries to tell them not to open the gate, but it's too late, and they're face to face with them.
And I'm also wondering if this is reminiscent of where we are in our current state in the country as well, because we do have people who, they're stockpiling arms and getting ready to fight against a tyrannical government. But these are the same people who are like, oh, well, I'm pro-police, I'm pro-troops. Meanwhile, if anything ever did happen, they would have to fight the police and fight the troops as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Who totally outarm them. I don't know if they outnumber them. I always wondered if the people who are meant to quell our protests and keep us in order, I always wondered if they realize where they are in the scheme of all things. That, let's say a cop who is at a protest, standing the line between those in power and those who are revolting, I wonder if he or she would ever see that they have more in common with those who are revolting than those they're protecting.
It's an interesting idea, because I feel like, in a way, like the police are like a gang, right? And like when you're put into the police, like you become a police officer, you're told certain things, right? Like Blue Lives Matter, and I feel like maybe they did feel that way at one time, but you get so caught up in it with your brothers in blue, so to speak, that you don't see it that way anymore. You see everyone else as the enemy. Like I don't know, I'm not a police officer, so I can't speak for that, but it certainly seems that way.
Well, yeah, but we also have seen the blue wall of silence is a very real thing that, in no other profession are you made to defend the people who are bad at their jobs except for being a police officer.
Yeah, that's very true.
Let's say when I was doing stand-up comedy, right? If Louis C.K. was found, to be a freaking creep, or even more extreme than that, Bill Cosby, who was found to be a rapist, I would not get up there and defend Bill Cosby just because I wouldn't say comedians' lives matter. It's just insane. Or, you working in grocery, if one of your employees, accidentally murders a customer, it's not like they would be all like, all right, we all stand behind this guy who murdered someone while looking at cantaloupes. Or while I was an admissions counselor, it's just like, well, if somebody does a bad job, you don't want them. If I were a cop, I'd think, no, get that person off the fucking force and stop having them give me a bad name. I'm a good cop.
It's because the police, they feel like their lives are on the line, right? Like they're out there in the streets, and there are bad people out there, Like there could be somebody with a gun who wants to kill a cop, a gang member, whatever it is, and they feel like their lives are on the line. Sometimes maybe they make the wrong choice, but they're under a lot of pressure. Or maybe there's not enough of them. Maybe they're afraid of losing too many fellow police officers. How are they gonna deal with that stress? I think that's where that comes from. And I think it's a lack of training. I mean, I think they're not properly trained to be in these possible life or death situations. And I've heard in the military in war zones have more restraint than a lot of police officers. And it makes you wonder. How are we failing them? Is this country failing its own police officers to put them in a position so that they can fail us?
100%. 100%. I believe so. I mean, I'm trying to get, I don't want to say his name just now. He might want it disguised if I ever get him on a future episode, but our mutual friend who's now a cop, I would love to get him on an episode because after he came out of the academy, he asked me to show him some martial arts moves. And I'm like, bro, like you just went through... he was like, yeah, but it was only 6 months of training. I'm like,
yeah, he didn't feel
only
prepared.
6 months of training? Like, okay, maybe you could have the junior police officers, give them 6 months of training, don't give them a gun. Like,
but I mean, it just seems so unfair to them to put them in those positions.
Like, what do you think of Philando Castile, which happened in 2016? He was a guy who was pulled over by a cop, followed all the rules, did all the right things, and was still killed by a cop. And when you see his girlfriend's video of the whole thing, the cop is freaking out just as much as the girlfriend is.
Yeah.
Like,
it's really sad.
Yeah, he's like, oh my God, he didn't do the right thing. Like, he was freaking out because he was scared too. And
you wonder how many accidents happen because of that, Like, maybe these police officers aren't always a bad person. You said, if you do something bad at your job, maybe they're not a bad person, but they made a mistake. And it's because of the lack of training.
I mean, the only difference is, okay, if somebody makes that mistake, you can admit to it. You can You can suspend them. You can give them therapy. There's so many other things you can do, but you don't have to come out and say, well, the guy he killed was listening to hip hop music. So was it really a mistake? Like, don't double down.
Yeah, there still has to be consequences, whether it was an accident or not, right?
Absolutely.
If I accidentally kill somebody while I'm cleaning my gun, I'm still going to get some sort of prison sentence, right? Whether it was an accident or not. So there has to be consequences, especially for someone in power like that.
Yeah, you have to hold people to a certain standard, like we do in every other profession. That was a bit of a digression. We get to this next point where they're still fighting the Axemen. It's a bloodbath right now. People are getting slaughtered, chopped up and everything, and they all stop to celebrate New Year's because they made their annual revolution around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've already started fighting. There's people bleeding to death on the floor, and they're all like, oh, wait, hold on, guys. Like, Happy New Year. And I think there's an axe guy with, blood coming out of his shirt, and he's, cheering with his axe.
And he's smiling, yeah.
It's so bizarre.
It is. And it goes to show that even if whether you're a tail ender or whether you're, someone who's up front being made to slaughter the tail enders with an axe, you're still on the same train. Like, you can find unity. If you can find unity in this 10 seconds of celebrating New Year's, you can find unity other times.
Yeah, I agree.
And then we also see one of the generals. He ends up having the choice whether to surrender or die. He yells out to surrender, but his superior, Tilda Swinton, she's like, nope, don't surrender, and lets him die.
Yeah, and then even he thinks, that he's somebody special, and he's not.
Yeah, she just wastes his life. But then when it comes to her, she chooses to surrender so that way she can live.
Absolutely, yeah. She's not going to die for this.
Yeah, and I mean, that's, we don't really have to go into that because that's just what happens, in real life. It's pretty obvious. The people in power are fine with sending lives to the slaughter, whether it be through war or whether it be right now in quarantine.
Yeah, they put the economy first, and they don't care about you.
Yeah, you and your fellow grocery workers are, they say, on the front lines, trying to make you guys, you're not soldiers. You're people who have to work because you will go broke and starve to death if you don't work.
Yeah, I think it's a really weird position to be in, where people think we're like, we know what we're doing, we know how to handle the situation, but we're figuring it out every day. I mean, this is not anything I think anyone I work with has ever expected to be put into this position where, people are relying on us for food so they don't starve to death during a pandemic, and we're all scared and stressed, and we've got people calling us on the phone and screaming at us and trying to figure it out, and it's we're not heroes, we're not soldiers, we're just working.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that whole terminology pisses me off too. Thank the heroes on the front lines, and it's like don't get me wrong, if you are someone who works in grocery, someone who works in the medical field, or some sort of first responder, then yes, you have to be on the front lines. And even to an extent, gas station workers, because all you people need to find ways to get to work.
Yeah.
But really, that's it. Anybody else, the people working at Taco Bell, as grateful as I was for them on 420 yesterday, they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't have to be there.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. My girlfriend works at a bakery, and they're considered essential. And, we're grateful for her. She's getting paid. But is a bakery really essential? Can you not live without it? It seems like a weird thing to say.
It does. We're totally fine with expending certain lives. And this woman who was fine with saving her own life, she tells everyone that they should be thankful for theirs. Even though their lives are bullshit, that they should just be thankful for having whatever they have, no matter how little they have. Which, I would believe if everybody had the same amount. But everybody doesn't. We've seen that there are certain people who are finally starting to donate to these efforts. But if a billionaire donates 1% of their wealth to help feed the hungry, there's so many people who are like, oh, we should be thankful that they donated anything because they don't have to donate it. They're not required to donate anything. They can continue hoarding all of their wealth, and we're absolutely fine with that. But how much morality does a person really have if they're hoarding wealth while others starve normally?
Well, the question is, how did they get there in the first place? What did they have to do to get into that position of wealth? And I won't talk about it now, but when we get towards the end of the film, we kind of figure out like how this train wound up becoming as successful as it was, and how the people at the front are able to survive off of this. And a lot of it is off the backs of the poor, you know, and it's the same with like Amazon, you know, and the way they use their workers, and they take advantage of them to make more money. And I feel like that's how they get into that position in the first place. So yeah, maybe they do owe us to make those contributions, you know? It's the least they can do.
They absolutely do. I mean, I just couldn't imagine having billions of dollars. I mean, I'm the person that if I get $500, I'm like, yo, I'm spending $100 so, you know, me and my friends can have food tonight. I'll treat. Like, that you can be aware of so much suffering in the world and then choose to not do a little something to help it. That's all.
That's why you'll never be a billionaire.
I don't have what it takes. That's absolutely true. We have this awesome moment with Gilliam, who we didn't really go into him yet, but Gilliam is this older man who's kind of Curtis's mentor. I believe he's led revolt before, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's been the de facto leader of the back of the train for the last, what is it, 18 years?
I think so. And Curtis is kind of enacting his will, basically.
Yeah, I mean, like, Gilliam's very, very old now. You know, he's missing a foot, he's missing a hand, he's weak.
And by that point, we're made to assume that he's missing feet and hands because he fought against the power and they froze his stuff just like they did to that other guy.
That's the punishment you assume he got for being the leader of this group. And, you know, he's the one that has kind of inspired Curtis to take up as his protege, more or less.
Yeah, and Curtis just feels that he's not worthy at this point. He says, how can I lead if I have two good arms? Because, you know, he hasn't sacrificed as much as Gilliam has. How are people going to follow someone who hasn't sacrificed?
Exactly. You know, he feels like he's not the guy. But Gilliam says, come on, you know you're the leader now. You know, and he says to him, it's better to have two arms.
He does say that. And it is kind of a good mentality to have, in my opinion. I am so much more likely to vote for AOC than I am for somebody who has never lived a common life and worked among the people. You know, somebody who's never really known what it was like to be one of us.
Well, this kind of reminds me almost of like Bernie Sanders and maybe AOC or someone who's going to come later on. You know, Gilliam's kind of like
definitely the Bernie, yeah.
Yeah, he's Bernie. You know, he's the one who's inspired this generation of people. You know, he's older, but at the same time, like, he understands the struggle and he's pushing the movement, you know, but relying on him and him alone will never complete it. So you need someone from the younger generation to come and help finish this fight and help them move it forward.
Who we're led to believe at this point is Curtis. We'll see how we feel about it once we make it to the end of the film.
Yeah, definitely. And when they get to the water supply, Curtis tells this woman from the front of the train that they've won, right? That they have the water, they can shut it off. They're gonna have to succeed to them that the tailenders have won.
They're gonna kind of hold it for ransom after they shut the water off. Okay.
Exactly. And the woman says to him, she's like, Curtis, you know, you're so silly. Like, water doesn't come from the back. It doesn't come from the tail. It comes from the front, through the mouth. She's like, the front of the train converts the snow and ice into water. She's like, you'd only be hurting yourself. You'd be shutting off water to yourself. You wouldn't be holding ransom anyone at the front.
And that's when Curtis decides, all right, well, if we're not taking the water, then we're taking the engine.
Yep, we're just going to keep going forward until we get to the very end and we confront Wolford, who is the one who created the train. We're going to get to the front. We're going to take him down.
And what a good idea that is, because we've also seen a lot of commentators on social unrest and protests and everything, and they're like, well, you know, nobody wants true revolution. We've also seen Biden say that. I mentioned it in the last episode. Nobody wants true revolution. You just want to make little, small pieces of progress, which is just insane to me that people are fine with just getting a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, give a little bit just to make a little bit of change, you know? And you've seen people also, right? Like, when NFL players were kneeling to protest the treatment of black people in this country, I've seen so many people on Facebook who are like, oh, aren't they happy enough? You know, they can vote, they can play in the NFL, they can do this, like, you know, stuff that even just 50, 60 years ago, like, might have not been legal, 70 years ago.
But it's not even about them. Like Colin Kaepernick, I don't think he was protesting his life. He wasn't saying, I had a horrible life. He had great parents. He had a great career. He was doing it for the people who didn't have that platform, who couldn't stand up for themselves. Like what Captain America said. I stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. And that's what he was doing. And people with that movement are trying to use their power to send the message. And there's this idea that if they do that, that it's a mistake. They shouldn't do that. And I feel like that's what the people at the top want us to feel. We don't want to be inspired by those messages. We want to shut them down right away.
And I think it's precisely where we're at now as well, just like you said, because we're made to believe that, if we get a little something, we should be happy. A little bit of leeway for reproductive rights. And it's like, no, man, like these are just temporary fixes. Things need to be changed for real. Otherwise, the same problems persist.
Yeah, we need real change.
Now, as they continue moving forward, they also get to the school, which is an area only for the front enders. The tail enders don't even get to have good food or food at all, let alone being able to learn in school. Although I wouldn't really call this an education. It seems to be more of indoctrination, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're showing them videos of how amazing Wilford was and how they basically like worship him and the engine like they're gods, right? And like that's kind of how they treat this education to teach them these things.
And that's where we are too, right? How many people are like, oh, well, we should just worship millionaires and, not question the people in authority.
Yeah, let's look up to them. They're the ones in charge. They have the power. They're our saviors.
And they also have this concept of what happens if the train stops. We all freeze and die. If we go outside, we all freeze and die. Like all the children and the people who are on this train too, all the adults are just indoctrinated to believe that there's no way you can survive outside of this current system. The system may be bad, but at least you're alive. If anything
it's the only
changes,
choice you have.
Yes, which is where we're made to believe right now, right? Like capitalism has shown its pitfalls time and time again, and yet, listen, it's still better than the alternative, which is we don't know.
Socialism, communism, any other system doesn't work, they'll tell you. It does not work. I think it's at this point, too, that they find out about the Seven, right? The Seven who had tried to rebel, and was it the Seven?
Yes, I was the Seven. Although I didn't count 7 when they showed it in the movie, but
yeah, it looked like 5.
Yeah, it did. But I'm pretty sure it was 7. Well, maybe that's something they cut out, or maybe it was in the comic book. I don't know, but maybe 2 people survived. Like,
yeah, or maybe they didn't even make it outside.
That's a possibility too. But yeah, we find out about the 7, and who were they again?
So basically, they were people who felt you could survive outside. I think it was I don't remember how many years after, maybe 7 years, 8 years, something like that. And they decided they were going to go outside and prove that you could live out there. So they kind of started a rebellion. And I think the leader of them was an Inuit woman, right? She understood the snow and the ice supposedly very well and really believed they could go out there. So they made this attempt to get off the train, which they did. I think they jumped off the moving train, they claimed, right? They couldn't stop it, but they were able to get outside. They started climbing the hill and they froze. And, whenever they passed this certain point over the year, they look outside and they look at the people frozen and they say, look, that's how far they got. No one can make it outside there.
And what a comparison to socialist critiques right now, right? We covered it in the last episode, the platform, but we still see similar comparisons now. Oh, well, this country, it didn't work out, so don't do it. This country, it didn't work out, so don't do it. Like that's just what we keep getting hammered into our heads, that capitalism is the only way. Anything else, whether it's socialism, communism, an ism that hasn't even been invented yet, will not work. We just got to stay with this.
Yeah. Yep. It's your only option, your only choice.
Now, tell me about this comparison between Wilford and powerful billionaires like Bezos.
Okay. Yeah. I feel as you watch this video that they're playing for the children, telling you about Wilford's life, right? They tell you he was, very. He loved trains as a kid, right? He's obsessed with trains. He wanted to build one, a luxury train that was going to go around the whole world. It was going to connect every country, and it would travel around the world over a year and be this uniting force. And everybody scoffed at him and thought it would never happen.
That's an insane idea. It's this.
Yeah, like it would never work. And what did he do? He proved them wrong, right? He like built this really big company. He made a ton of money. He built the train. And now at the end of the world, who is everyone relying on? Him and his train. Just like Jeff Bezos, right? Like he had this idea for Amazon, and supposedly people really didn't think it would work. They looked down on him. They made fun of him for it. And what did he do? He succeeded, right? He built his empire. He built the Amazon brand, and here we are during this pandemic when people are being discouraged from going out and asked to stay at home. And who are we relying on? Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I mean, they're making more money than ever. They're the ones coming to your house and delivering everything from food to toilet paper to video games, whatever it might be that you need to get through your day. We're relying on them. So to me, like Wilfred and Jeff Bezos are very, very, very similar.
I love that comparison. It's not one I would have made, so I'm really glad that you did. It also seems kind of like a Trump comparison to me, except Bezos has had a successful business while Trump has had none. We do see that there are still people who just eat up his whole narrative that, I built all these great businesses and I'm a real estate mogul, despite all of these businesses failing and him screwing over the working man and stuff like that. There's still people who are the working people who still eat that narrative up, just like these children in the school car. They have no choice but to eat it up because that's all they know. They're just like, this guy with totally wild ideas is actually the victim of sane thinking people, and we have to back him because he sees what's really going on, despite the fact that a giant train that's going to keep running and protect the rest of humanity is really an unprecedented, but also completely bonkers idea.
Yeah, and like you said, they're indoctrinating these children. I mean, like, look at us, right? In school, I'm not saying I'm anti-Pledge of Allegiance, but they make kids do it, right? Like when you're in school, you have to do the Pledge of Allegiance. My girlfriend's nephew was being homeschooled, and they're asking them to do the Pledge of Allegiance every day at home. Like you have to do this, and you're taught what, how great America is and how the system works. And like, you don't get a true, accurate portrayal of our government or our country's history.
And it is a real shame because it does lead to this false patriotism, that you pledge allegiance to a country that you don't even know what their values really are at that point. And I used to be that person too, who was like, listen, there's the greatest country in the world, blah, blah, blah. I can still criticize the government without getting my head chopped off. That's great. We'll see how long that lasts for. But, now there's this idea that if you do criticize America, that you are anti-America, which is just not the case. I might have said it in an earlier episode. I don't remember, but my outlook on it is this. If you have a child and you love that child, when they make a mistake, you correct it and ask them to do better because you love them and you want them to be their best selves. And it's the same thing with our country. If your country makes a mistake, you don't just go, oh, well, that's America, love it or leave it, it is what it is. You go, no, do better, do the right thing. You're the best country in the whole goddamn world. You better live up to that and take care of your people.
Yeah, why accept anything less than the best we can be?
Yeah, and that's why, I don't believe in burning the flag. I mean, I'm not against it, but I do believe in holding the flag upside down. That's the anti-flag logo, punk band. Progressive punk band. The idea is that your country is in distress. That's why you hold that flag upside down. It's a means to ask for help, to bring attention to it.
So I think it's important to note, that they've gotten pretty far at this point to get to the school. And in order to do that, Curtis had to make a really, really difficult choice, right? Like when they were fighting these guys with the axes, there was a point where they hit a tunnel and it was pitch black. The enemy had night vision goggles and they were just slaughtering the people in the back. So, Curtis calls for Chan, who you mentioned earlier, they needed the light, right? They needed fire. So
Chan stole the matches.
Yes, he stole the matches. So he lights a torch and he runs it forward and then he passes it to the man whose arm was smashed earlier in the film. And then they keep passing it forward and all of a sudden the light comes and our heroes from the back are able to see again and they start fighting. And Curtis, he's like, I have to end this. I have to save my people. So he rushes forward. He's gonna take down this woman from the front. And while he's doing that, his good friend Edgar is held captive, right? And Edgar has a blade to his throat, and he screams, "Curtis!" And Curtis turns, and he's about at the halfway point. He has to choose between going back and saving Edgar or taking out this lady from the front and ending the battle. And he turns around and he puts his back to Edgar, and he doesn't even look back. He rushes forward. He takes her down, and unfortunately, Edgar is murdered right there. And he ends the fight though. Curtis, he keeps the movement going. He doesn't stop.
And we've seen Curtis at this point. He does make a sacrifice, but once again, it's not his own, really.
It's not his own. It's someone else.
And thanks so much for bringing this moment back up, because I completely glossed over it. But yeah, we see Chan bring up this torch, and then comes that theme again, right? That the next generation, they're going to be the ones to save us. They're the ones who can see, the ones who we pass the torch to, and they will be able to bring light to stuff that we're blind to.
Yeah, wow. Accurate.
I did it. I said that. Oh, man. So as we move on, we find out exactly how the front enders are living, right?
Yeah. We see the life. They have sushi, right? They have an aquarium. I mean, they have anything you can imagine from the world before the train that would give them pleasure. They have it here.
Now, that being said, I didn't give enough credit to Wilford exactly. And it's kind of like how, once again, with the Bezos situation, maybe he's not doing the most ethical things, with his money right now, with his wealth, or for his workers at all. You can't deny that Amazon's an amazing idea.
No, it's great. I mean, it's
you can't deny it.
Delivered right to your door. You don't have to go out. I mean, it's so helpful, especially for people who have disabilities or elderly or can't leave their home. And you can get cat food delivered to your house. It's like whatever you need. It's an incredible system.
And it doesn't stop there, right? There's Amazon Prime where you can get free shipping, but you also get Amazon Video. There's original series and movies on Amazon. You get Audible, which is, allowing you to hear audiobooks and stuff like that. You have Amazon Music.
Like the Prime Pantry. You get, food and things. They've even partnered now with Whole Foods, right? You can get stuff from Whole Foods delivered. You can get a discount at Whole Foods by showing your Amazon Prime membership.
And we see that Wilford himself, he may be mad, but he's also a mad genius here. That every car has its own specific ecosystem. Like this whole aquarium here is a self-sustaining aquarium where they're able to reproduce fish and breed them, and that's how they have their sushi. That's how they have everything. They have a meat car and stuff too. Like it may not be fair, but the way that they still have the whole train running is really an incredible invention.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. They know, that they only have sushi twice a year, right? Yes. And it's because they have to keep everything the system has to remain closed. They can't overfish the aquarium. They have to make sure they're maintaining the right amount there. Nothing can be out of order. So that's why they only have sushi twice a year. But they will have it. They'll have it twice a year. It's something to look forward to. But they can't shake that system up.
Yes. Now, we also find out that while, we might have thought that there were no more fish to eat from, we also thought that there weren't any more bullets left on the train. And it turns out there are. They've been saving it for the front of the train, if things ever got really bad. And now it comes out. They start slaughtering people with their guns again.
Well, there's this great moment because we know that someone has been passing messages through the cockroach bars throughout the film.
Yes.
And that's how they've been getting information about the rebellion to help move it forward.
Someone from up front has been passing messages to the back, yeah.
Exactly. And Gilliam keeps telling Curtis, let's wait for another message. Like, he was trying to stop them from getting this far. He's like, we should wait. Like, we have to wait for the next message. Much like, Bernie Sanders, like, we got to fall in line with the Democrats, like, let's vote for Biden. Like, we can't go, too far out. We can't start our own party. We can't do this kind of thing, and Curtis is like, no, we have to do it now. We can't wait. We can't just follow this system that doesn't work anymore. Like, we've tried rebellions with this in the past. So they get a message here, and I forget the exact message, but basically it's relating to the bullets, So, like, whoever's passing this message knows Curtis has been getting them and wants him to know he's wrong.
Yes, and while they're passing messages through food and everything, at this point they're handing out eggs, and Curtis pulls out the message, and it's a red scroll, a little red scroll, and it says blood on it. And that's when pop, 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 like people just start getting slaughtered. And then I think that's when over the security cameras, Curtis sees Gilliam over the security cameras, and right on camera there, he gets his brains blown out.
Yeah, I mean, he sees basically his entire movement getting gunned down, except for a handful of, selective people that are going with him to the end. And, it's this it could be a defeating moment, right? That could be the moment it's like, hey, we just lost our leader in a way. We've lost, our people. But, they decide they're going to keep moving forward. They're going to keep that movement going to the very end.
So at this point, it would be easy for Curtis to let the whole movement go, but Octavia Spencer smacks him out of his stupor, and she's like, listen, you're leading us now. Let's go. Like, let's keep this thing moving. She lost her son earlier, so she's, motivated to get there.
Yeah, her son was taken to the front with another boy.
So while they move up to the front, we see that there's a bunch of other stuff that not only are they eating sushi, but they're getting their hair done. They have tailors. They have bars where they can drink at.
They have dentists. I mean, they have anything that anyone in a first world country would want or need.
Yeah, they have a spa. They have clubs where people go and dance and get wasted at. It's insane. And at one point, when Elder Franco is searching for Min-soo and Yona in the spa, he ends up accidentally killing one of the front-end passengers, and at that point, a guard steps up. He's like, hey, you killed a front-end passenger, and I think he kills him too.
Yeah, he does. He goes, he didn't see anything. Like doesn't matter. We're going to cover this up.
The guards were fine with all of the people in the back of the train being slaughtered, but once somebody who's a front-ender, somebody who's deemed more important gets killed, he has this whole problem with it, right?
Yeah, he's not okay with it. But this guy, Elder Franco, he doesn't care. He's out for blood. He's kind of crazed. He wants to kill Curtis and his group so badly.
Now, speaking of people being okay with certain lives being lost, the people in front don't mind the people in back dying, but they definitely don't want themselves to get killed. It seems to be where we're at right now, too, right? There are people who are pushing for the reopening of the economy, reopening America, despite the fact that lives are going to be lost. And what's worse is they've recognized that lives are going to be lost, and they're still okay with it.
Yeah, they're like, listen, we can't put our lives on hold for this, so you have to just suck it up, and the weak are going to die, and we're going to move on and get the economy going again.
Even though the weak dying just means the poor and old.
Yeah, I mean, there's people with signs saying, I want a haircut. They want you to die so they can get their haircut.
How much privilege can you have in a single sign?
It's unbelievable.
Seriously. So what else is unbelievable is Curtis's, I guess I'll call it his origin story. Sure. We finally get up to the front of the train, the car that holds the engine. Is there anything else you wanted to cover before we talk about the engine? Well,
I think it's important to note that everyone that has gone on this journey with him has died. They have all died kind of for him in a lot of ways. They've all fought to protect him and help him move forward, and they have all been slaughtered and killed. And it's only him, Min-soo, and Min-soo's daughter, Yona. And they're the only three that make it to the very end. And it's also interesting that Min-soo, all he cares about, he doesn't care about this movement. He just cares about Chrono, right? That drug. He just wants more of that drug. He demands, every time they open the gate, they had to give him more. When they're going through the club, he's pocketing them. Like, that's all he wants.
And they come in these little cubes, right? These little cubes that they look almost like coal, and yeah, like you said, they're scratch and sniff, but it's just such a weird delivery system for a drug.
It is. It's really odd.
And another thing I wanted to bring up, now that you brought that up, is one part that was cut out of the film is that there's actually a brothel car. Did you know that?
I did not know that, no.
Yeah, when the train first was created and people were on it, a bunch of women from the tail end were taken to the front to be in the brothel. And that they only left enough women in the back so that way they could reproduce.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Because everything has to be controlled, as we'll find out in a few minutes. So tell me this story. As we finally get to the last gate, Curtis and Min-soo, they share a cigarette. And Min-soo's saying, like, listen, I don't want to open the last door. And Curtis is like, listen, you have to open the last door. Here's my story. What does he tell him?
So Minsu gives him the last cigarette on Earth, and he takes a puff of it, and then he just lets it burn down as he tells the story, because the story is so much more important than the cigarette. And he tells him that basically when they got on this train, they were shoved into the back. I don't know if he says like 1,000 people, something along those lines. A whole bunch of people shoved into the back, and they were given no food and no water. And he says the horrible thing is they had to start eating each other. They ate the weak. And Curtis has this moment where he breaks down because he says, I know what people taste like, and I know that babies taste the best.
That was such a heartbreaking moment. It was so fucked up.
So this whole movie, we're looking at Curtis as this hero, and he makes a few choices that are questionable, but overall, he's this heroic leader for the group. And when he says that line, he breaks down. You realize there's a whole lot more to him. He tells Minsu that he's not this hero. There came a point where they were just slaughtering anyone they could to eat, and there was this baby, and they were going to eat the baby, and somebody else stepped up and said, leave the baby alone, and cut their own arm off. He throws it to them and says, listen, if you're so hungry, eat that instead. And Curtis, he's in tears, and he says, I'm sure you can guess who that man was. It was Gilliam. Gilliam was the one who cut off his own arm to save this baby. And that baby was Edgar. And the man with the knife that was going to kill the baby was Curtis. Curtis was going to slaughter a baby to eat it. And he wasn't strong enough to do the right thing. He was more worried about his own health. He killed Edgar's mother. And throughout the film, you had known that Edgar looked up to Curtis. He had viewed him as a hero, as his leader. He wanted to be just like him. But he never knew the truth, that the man that he looked up to tried to kill him and killed his own mother. It was Gilliam who saved him. And in the end, what happens? Curtis let Edgar die anyway. He still didn't save him when he had the choice. And Curtis, he says he tried to do the same thing. He tried to cut off his own arm, and he couldn't do it. He has a scar on his arm from where he tried, but he just wasn't strong enough to do what Gilliam could do. And that's his fear and his weakness, and that's what he's carried with him. And I feel like that's a big part of why he has pushed so hard here at the end to be this hero, because he's trying to make up for his sin.
What I think makes it worse is that Curtis says that other people inspired by Gilliam were able to cut off parts of themselves for others to eat.
Yeah, he was not strong enough.
Which, Gilliam doesn't hold it against him either. He's like, listen, you have 2 arms. You're going to need 2 arms for what you have to do.
Yeah, he's picked him to be his successor, right? The movement is in your hands. So, he sees something in Curtis, and they mentioned that Wilford had heard of him, that he'd heard of Curtis, that he was smart and, charismatic. So, there is something unique about him, but at the same time, he's also been a coward. He's been at his lowest point, and I think that's what drives him.
Yeah, but, really, he's just like everybody else. Like, he couldn't come up with the idea to chop off his own arm and save babies. He just went with everybody else, was just trying to survive. And I brought it up in the last episode in the platform. Is it your fault that you've made those choices, or is it society's fault? Is it the system's fault? I don't have an answer to it, but I just like asking the question.
It's a good question to ask.
Would I eat a baby to survive? Probably not, but it's times like that, certain people, they get desperate and think of whole new ways. Necessity is the mother of invention.
But you never get put into a spot where you're so hungry and there's no food, we don't know. It's hard to know what you'll do when faced with your own demise.
Who knows what May 2020 is going to bring? You never know.
Yeah.
So in response to this, right, Minsu says listen, bro. All right, he doesn't say that, but he's like, yes, I want to open the gate. He's like, I don't want to open this gate. I want to open that gate. And he points to a door that's in the wall. And he's like, you may view that as a wall. He's like, but I see it as a door out of here. And you find out that the chronol is actually very flammable. It's explosive even. And that he's been collecting all of these drugs, not to get high, but he's been putting them together with a fuse to make a bomb to get out of the train. And he's like, listen, that Inuit woman who knows how to survive in the snow, she taught me how to survive in the snow. So I'm taking Yona, and we're going to get out of here.
Yeah, it's a big moment. It's like, we were going to leave the train. What about the 7? They froze to death. They didn't make it all those years ago. But Minsu noticed something that no one else did. Every year they passed this plane that had crashed, and it was covered in snow. And I think all he could see was the tail at first. But year after year, little by little, you could see more and more of the plane. The snow was melting. And I don't know if you looked into this, but according to the director, the Inuit woman was actually Yona's mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very subtle. Like,
that's
they don't want,
awesome.
But yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. So before Minsu and Curtis can fight it out over which gate's going to be opened, Wilford opens his gate and lets Curtis in.
Yeah, right. Not before shooting Minsu, though.
Yes, Minsu is shot by one of Wilford's people, and Curtis comes in, and Wilford basically explains his whole outlook on life, that, he is keeping this train moving for a reason, and everyone has a place they need to be in order to keep it moving. And he's like, listen, we're all stuck on this train. We're all suffering, which is kind of like right now, right? You see people in the 1% who are like, listen, we're all suffering in this quarantine. I'm in my mansion. You're in your 1-bedroom apartment, struggling, trying to make ends meet. We're all, we're all struggling. Here. Yeah. And Curtis says, he goes, anyone on this train would trade places with you. Wilford goes, would you trade places with me? And he's like, fuck you. Like, it's such a good back and forth they have.
Wolford played to perfection by Ed Harris. He just,
really,
just has that arrogance about him. He says, do you think my place is without its problems? He's like, it's noisy in here. He's comparing a noisy engine to the people in the back eating cockroaches and having eaten each other at one point. Like, it's just such an arrogant way to look at it.
But he has this way of speaking, like you said, played to perfection, that just kind of makes you think that, oh, maybe he has a point.
He's just so matter of fact. Like, it makes sense. Like, he's right. It makes you want to listen to him. And Gilliam had told Curtis, if you find him, cut his tongue out.
Because that's what it is, right? Those silver-tongued people who are going to convince us to vote against our best interests, they're the real dangerous ones, aren't they?
They are. They really are. They can convince anybody to do it, to fall in line.
He says that basically everything that happens on that train is controlled by him. Where the people are, what the people eat, everything needs to stay in perfect synchronization and perfect harmony. He has a whole ecosystem with everything, including the revolutions, the protests.
Yeah, it's controlled opposition, right? Like, the idea that rebellion is going to happen. People aren't going to just sit there and accept it. So do you let it happen naturally, or do you dictate the course of its actions? So that's what he chooses to do. He decides how the rebellion is going to happen, when it's going to happen. He's the one sending those messages back. And,
he was the one sending the messages, yeah.
Yep. In this way, he knows the outcome before it happens, and it makes the people think, all right, like, we gave it a shot. This was an organic thing. It's something that I've heard of in our political system. They'll put people out there who you think are fighting for your interests, and they're opposing maybe, Trump or Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, they're actually being funded by the same people. And whether they win or Joe Biden or Trump wins, at the end of the day, they're still going to have the same interests of the people at the top.
You'll still be on the train.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. And what a tragic moment, because you find out that he also controls how many people die in these revolts. He'll be like, all right, we need to cut down the tail enders to 74%. Go do that.
Yep. They choose this percentage of how many people are going to die. And it's just so matter of fact for them. He keeps bringing up everyone has their preordained positions, right? Like, this is just the way it is. Like, it's the only way to keep humanity going.
And that people should technically be happy with what they get, because after the whole eating each other incident in the back of the train, Gilliam was the one who spoke to Wilford, and that's how they started getting their protein bars. And they were fine with that because they were like, oh, well, it's better than us eating each other. It's still terrible, but it's a little bit, it's 1% better,
And Wilford
That's
just keeps pushing Curtis. I mean, he makes a phone call. He tells him to keep calling the people. And he holds the phone out as the machine gun fire and the screams in the background. And Curtis slams his fist on the table and he stands up. And, you know, that woman's got the gun on him. And Wilford's like, calm down. Like, calm down. Like, you're overreacting. Like, it's just so like chill out, man. Like, it's not a big deal.
Well, yeah, Curtis is very good at gaslighting people, which is when you may be overreacting to something and somebody's telling you that your feelings aren't really valid, whether it's something an abusive parent or an abusive spouse does to you, or somebody who's a political commentator. They'll be like, listen, like, you're being too emotional, you're being too dramatic.
You mean
Things
Wilford,
aren't
right?
that
Not
bad.
Curtis.
Wilford, yes.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
That's what Wilford's doing. And I know a lot of people in my real life who are like that they're just like, oh, you know, you can't let yourself be controlled by emotion, man. The numbers say this, so guess what? Climate change actually isn't a big deal. The numbers say this, so guess what? You know, the flu kills more people. Coronavirus isn't a big deal. COVID-19 isn't as bad as it seems to be. You know, but that's like looking at 9/11 and being like, oh, the flu kills more people. Don't worry about it. Like, you know, people are very selective, but in a way that just helps them prove their point. We also find out that Wilford is ready to stop running the train. He wants Curtis to take over for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, first he breaks Curtis, because what does he tell him? He tells him that the entire time Gilliam has been conversing with him. You know, Gilliam is also that controlled opposition in a way. You know, was he ever really trying to help the people? I don't know. You know, he makes it seem like, he says, not only was he my partner, he was my friend. We would have late night chats. You know, he was the one who we would go back and forth about. You know, we picked you together.
And at that point, you know, Curtis, what a position to be in, right? He finds out that he is also part of this system, and that, you know, maybe the ideas that he believed in this whole time were put there, and maybe they're not really his. Maybe he's just, you know, he's just fighting for Gilliam's dream.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wilford mentions he didn't expect him to get to the end at this point, but at some point he was going to come and get him. That he was going to be his chosen successor, not even Gilliam's. You know, he is going to be Wilford's successor to take over the engine.
And before he has to make this choice, I want to go back to this idea that all of the protests, all of the revolts have been planned to this point, because we're seeing it happen in real life right now. You know, we see that the Michigan Freedom Fund was a co-host of the rally that was held in Michigan by a bunch of people who showed up with their signs and their Trump flags and their Confederate flags and their guns, saying that they want everything to be reopened so they can live their lives again. The Michigan Freedom Fund took $500,000 from the DeVos family. You know, Betsy DeVos,
Yep.
appointed to look over education in the country by Donald Trump. And we also see now it's not even subtle, right? Trump is on Twitter encouraging people to protest, and for some reason saying that their Second Amendment needs to be saved, which isn't even part of the argument. Like, anyone who would believe that is an idiot.
He's saying liberate yourselves.
Yeah, but like, it's so ridiculous because he's making decisions that governors are following and then saying fight back against those governors to keep the economy going. It just doesn't make any sense to me how anyone believes this, that somehow public health, life and death, has become a right-wing versus left-wing issue.
It's crazy, man. It's like literally people's lives we're fighting over. And I feel like this moment in the film is just, there's so much about it that we can relate to right now. I mean, I think the idea of him giving this possibility to Curtis to take over happens to like a lot of politicians, right? Who start out with the right idea, they want to do the right thing, and then they're given this choice, right? It's like, listen, the system doesn't work if it's chaos. We have to keep them in line for their own health. Like, join us. Like, join up with us. You know, we're gonna make people. You know, Wilford keeps saying people will die. You know, like they cannot live. They'll just go into chaos if they don't have us to do this for them. And I think Gilliam and Bernie Sanders you can see it even more here. You know, Gilliam seems like maybe the choices he made was because he really felt like he was saving lives. And that's why he joined up with Wilford. You know, we don't know how much of it's true because Gilliam's dead. And this is all coming from Wilford. But it certainly seems plausible. And Bernie Sanders like joining... Exactly, joining with the DNC, you know, endorsing Biden. Like, he believes it's for the greater good. You know, I don't think he does it because he wants to hurt people. but in the end, he's kind of killing the movement that he started.
And now, while Curtis is considering all this, he sees something that really...
Well, like, leading up to that, I mean, all the people from, like, the front, they start, like, going crazy, right? Because their drugs were stolen. So they come after Minsu and Yona, and they start attacking them. And Minsu tells Yona that she has to blow the train doors open. And she winds up opening up the front, right? The front to the engine, and confronting Curtis and Wilford. And she tries to get Curtis to help her. And he puts his hand out because he's beginning to think he's going to accept Wilford's offer. He's really considering it. And I think that was such a big moment. It was like, is he this good guy? Has he learned his lesson? And then he puts his hand out to her to, like, stay away from me for a second. Like, maybe this is the right way.
Somebody's got to run the train. If it's me, I can make things better.
Exactly.
You think that. You think you can be a good person in a corrupt system. Which, always bring it back to Batman. You either die a hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Like, at some point, in order to keep things going, he's going to have to make those choices, right? He's going to have to choose who dies in order to keep the rest of the train running. And maybe things will be a little better the way he runs it. But in the end, he'll end up drone striking Gaza Strip. Like,
Yeah, I mean.
So what he does see that finally shakes him out of the apathy is Yona has to be the one to show him that under one of the floor panels, there's this mechanism that needs to keep moving in order to keep the engine going. And in order for that mechanism to work, there's a child, one of the children who was taken at the beginning of the movie.
It's Octavia Spencer's son.
Yeah, Timmy. And he's there, taking the waste away from the whatever the engine creates and putting it somewhere else. But he's this little child in this fucking box. Okay, sorry. He's this little child in this box, head shaved bald, identity stripped from him. And there's this gear, this cog that keeps turning over him. And he's barely looking away from his job. Like, that's all he can do is just keep doing this job until he grows too big for it. And then who knows what happens after that.
Yeah. We have no, maybe he's killed, to keep the secret safe. When Wilford says, the engine is everlasting. It'll never die. But the parts to it, not so much.
And at this moment, this is Curtis's Gilliam moment, right?
Yep.
Well, first he beats the living shit out of Wilford, which Wilford again, he's like, "Don't be so dramatic," blah blah blah.
But this is to Curtis. This is the point that separates him, right? Like he already tried to kill a child once, and he just can't. He can't do this again. He can't ever, live by stepping over children.
He needs to make the sacrifice. And he decides to stop this gear that's turning over this child's head so the kid can escape. And the only way to do it is he sticks his arm in order to lift this kid out. While he's doing it, another kid starts taking a position, like an emergency position, to keep the engine moving. And he's like, no, don't do this. And he's able to take little Timmy out. And in doing so, that gear keeps moving through and chops off Curtis's arm. Like, he finally has his moment of sacrifice that he's been talking about, which is very reminiscent of Mario Savio, who...
Yeah.
If you look to our show notes, you'll see that, what he represented. But he has this awesome speech, and he says in it, there is a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even tacitly take part, and you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. And that is right in this moment, that he literally puts his body on the gears and sacrifices his own physical well-being to stop this machine, because the machine isn't just. He stops the whole train. He's willing to end the world, basically, right? Because all of humanity is left on this train, and he's willing to end it so that way these children don't suffer. Basically, a system that works unjustly isn't a system that's worth working at all.
Exactly. He makes that decision right then and there. Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it, the bones of our children to kill them and work them like this so that we can all live. We have to end it.
It's not about sacrificing the future, right? It's about trusting the future, trusting the children, which has been the theme throughout all three of these movies. It's been a theme throughout all three of these movies. And in trusting the next generation, we find Yona, who, wait, is Minsu still alive at this point? He is, right?
He is, yeah. He's still alive. He's been holding off this, crowd of people, and that Franco the Elder, who's still alive after they killed him 13 times. He's come back.
Franco Voorhees, yes.
Yeah, Franco Voorhees. He's been holding them all off after being shot in the gut. And he's like, we got to do this now. We got to do this now.
So, of course, Yona, she lights the chrono bomb and explodes the front of the train. At this point, I think it's Minsu, the little boy Timmy, Yona, and Curtis, they all exchange a group hug as the train goes off the rails and crashes. It's a complete wreck. People are dead. The train is off the tracks. The end of the world is truly here.
I don't even think it's a group hug. I think they're shielding Yona and Timmy. Because they can't get the door to close to the engine to protect them from the explosion. So I think Minsu and Curtis try to wrap them in their bodies to protect them as best they can.
That they're doing the right thing and
it's
just
letting
sacrifice. The future survive, even if they have to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome. I mean, but that's the case of anyone who's ever made incredible changes, right? You say, we plant seeds. We plant the seeds of trees that we'll never be able to sit in the shade of. Right? Everything we do should be for the future. Even you and I at this point, we're only 30 years old, but can you imagine being a child in elementary school who's in quarantine right now, man?
I couldn't even imagine it.
How heartbreaking is that?
It really is. It's horrible.
It is. I mean, and hopefully we can get past this, and hopefully those kids can be the ones to change the world because, they'll remember. Listen, I was 10 years old when a leader who didn't believe in science caused this many Americans to die. I was 10 years old when I saw people rightfully working against their own interests. And that's why, I'm changing things now. Or I was 10 years old when this happened. Oh, wait, the Marauders are coming up overhead. Let's just keep hiding.
Yeah.
And go out later to find supplies. That's also a possibility.
It is. Sadly.
So all in all, after the smoke clears, Yona and little Timmy, they put on their fur coats that they stole from that Minsu stole from the partiers in the club, and they make their way out into the snow.
And they survive, right? They don't freeze to death. They're able to walk around. It's cold, but the snow is now, at a reasonable temperature where you can survive out in it. And they look up and they see a polar bear. And it's this moment you also realize Minsu had seen it earlier. They were walking through the train and he had stopped to look out the window and he was mesmerized. And right before Curtis went in to talk to Wilfred, he says, I looked out the window and I saw, and he kind of laughs and he's like, never mind. When Curtis goes, that chrono, those hallucinations, whatever it is, I'm sure it wasn't real. But it was. He saw life out there. He saw life was coming back.
And it's really such a beautiful moment because it shows that, life is coming back and that the polar bears were able to survive on their own, too.
Yeah, they were.
This whole time. They didn't have to be on the train.
Nope.
And the ironic thing is that right now in our world, polar bears are struggling to survive, right?
They are. They really are.
What a great choice by that film's creators, writers, director, seriously. And we see that they'll hopefully continue to survive and hopefully be able to, build the world again.
It's a surprisingly hopeful message for such a dark and depressing film.
I don't think we got that from the other two films either. We didn't get that from Parasite. We barely got it from The Platform.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. This is where the young generation who've hopefully learned from the mistakes of the past, they get a chance to rebuild as best they can. Realistically, I don't know how many people are still alive. Can they really restart the human population? I don't know, but at least they have a chance of free will to do it.
Well, I think the other thing is, too, like, who's to say that other people around the world still haven't survived on their own?
Yeah, we don't know. We only know what was told to us on this train, right? Like, that's what
Yeah.
Wilford told them.
And now that we see there is life outside the train, there is life outside this system, this kind of made me view things. If I were to relate it to our current political system, it does seem like Curtis and Gilliam, like they were the Democratic Party, and that they were trying to be progressive, but within the train. And Min Soo, the guy who everyone thought was crazy, Min Soo was true progressivism. He was like, yeah, like we're not on this. We can live outside of the train. We don't need this system to survive. And it's kind of like that's where we are now. The DNC has to take a major hit. They have to cut off their arm. They have to make a sacrifice for true progressivism. I mean, they won't. They don't want to.
There's an argument for a what's it called, dem break? Like a third party to truly emerge. Like, why are we stuck in a two-party system? And this has been a big thing for progressives. Like, we're never going to actually get what we hope for through the Democrats. That's what this has proven to us. We can't actually get them to ever truly go to the left and try any of these ideas. We're going to have to create a new system. And that's what Minsu does. He says we have to fucking break this train down and go out there and start anew.
And his whole plan wasn't even for him to be the one to do it. It was for Yona, his daughter, to survive.
Yeah, that was it the whole time. That's what he wanted. He wanted her to move on and escape this trap.
And there's so many people who believe in the trap. They believe that, guess what? Okay, well, we weren't able to get with Bernie, but let's side with Biden, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, you believe in ideas, don't believe in people. That's what real life has taught us. That's what this movie has taught us, right?
That's exactly it. You can't rely on one single person. Like, the movement has to be bigger than a person. That's the only way it'll work. Because if you cut off the head, it dies otherwise.
And it's okay to believe in yourself, too, right? Like, Yona wasn't the one who was, believing in all the other people. Like, oh, we believe in Curtis, blah, blah, blah. Yona was the one at the end who's going to have to rebuild the population. And that's where a lot of us are right now. We got to believe in ourselves. We got to be the ones to make that difference. We can't count on phony leaders to do it. We can't count on, Bernie, who just keeps getting kneecapped at every turn.
Yeah, every time. Every time we're so close to the end, to real change, and he just bows down. He can never finish it.
We talked a lot about the reading between the lines of this movie. Outside of its metaphors, would you recommend this movie?
Yeah, if you don't want to delve too deep into it, it's just a really great sci-fi film. It's really cool. It's great acting, some really, really interesting stuff they do with this film. I highly recommend it. I mean, obviously, Bong Joon Ho is a fantastic director. He's finally being recognized after Parasite. So it's cool to see, what he's been able to do here. I mean, the movie was made on a budget of about $40 million. It made $86.8 million roughly at the box office. So it didn't make a ton. It was profitable, but I think not enough people really knew about this film or about him as a director. And I think he's finally getting recognized, which is great.
Listen, a profit of over $40 million is a recommendation enough, so I recommend it as well. Like you said, great action movie, great sci-fi flick. It's got Chris Evans in it, Captain America. It's got Tilda Swinton in her best Austin Powers costume. It's got Ed Harris. It's just a really, really fun film to watch regardless. Now, next week, we're going to be going from the vault. I'm going to be releasing a long-awaited Black Panther episode that I did, part 1 of 2. In the meantime, both of us are going to work on a nice little side project, kind of a little sorbet to clear out all of the heavy stuff that we normally talk about on this podcast. A little bit of comedy, kind of just something ridiculous to have. But we'll tell you more about that later on. We're going to work on it in the meantime. Next week, we're going to have Black Panther. Thank you so much for listening. Ty, thank you so much for being on yet again. It's been really awesome to do this with you, and I'm hoping we can just keep going forward.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I feel like it's great. We've been able to get some awesome stuff off our chests, and I look forward to doing more with you.
That's absolutely true. It's really just about venting everything, and hopefully we're not the only ones who believe this stuff. Now, if you don't believe what we're talking about, don't hesitate to reach out to us, okay? You can email us at politipopcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at politipoppod. You can find us on Instagram at politipoppodcast. You want to find our show notes and sources, you can go to politipoppodcast.wordpress.com. I want to give a special thanks to our listeners and also to Antonia Little for logo design. We're going to be writing out on a song today. It is Prayer of the Refugee by Rise Against. Also very relevant lyrics. If you want to listen to all of their music, it's very relevant. Rise Against is a great band with a lot of great songs. Ty, it has been great having you on once again. Looking forward to working with you next time. Have a good one, all right?
Thanks, man. Take care, guys.
And remember, listeners, no matter what you're reading, no matter what you're watching, no matter what you're taking in, always remember
It's like a hallucinogen. They don't really go too much more into it, but like you like scratch and sniff it almost like a scratch and sniff Snicker, I think, sticker, and you hold on. Let me do that one again.
saves the calories, yeah. Is the comic book Korean? I knew it was based on a comic book. I didn't know it was a Korean book.
I thought it was, but I'll have to look into that. Like right now.
Snowpiercer comic book. Le Transpersonnage. It might be...
Oh, was it French?
It's a French graphic novel.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and you're not sure if it's a means of him just wanting to stop the rebellion or if he really just has a vendetta against Curtis and his crew.
They did show that his brother was killed earlier.
Oh, is that who that guy was wearing the suit?
Yeah, like they were really close. Like he was kind of resting his head on his shoulder. According to IMDb,
I thought they were a couple.
So did I, but he's called Franco the Younger, so I'm assuming they're brothers.
Yeah, they're brothers then. Definitely. Okay, cool. See, good thing you looked into it.
I got you.
Dude, you're gonna take over the podcast one.
As long as you keep editing it.
Absolutely. Give us a little bit of numbers real quick on this film.
What?
The numbers? Or did you want me to cover that?
I just said it. Didn't you hear me?
Oh, no, I missed it. Sorry.
Jesus. I just said the budget and how much it made at the box office.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Sorry. I'm a fucking terrible host.
That's why I'm like, what the fuck are you saying?
Yeah. Like, all right, now give us the numbers for real, though. Don't give us the fake
I'm
numbers.
like, I don't have any other numbers. Like,
Do you
you
know
got
if
me.
that-
That was the fake numbers.
It's got Octavia Spencer and an Austin Powers getup. You know, there's and it's got Ed Harris too. Like it really is just a fun. Who did I say was in a?
Octavia Spencer.
Oh God, let me go back. Tyler and I. Ty and I are working on. Ty and I doesn't sound right.
Along with Ty, with my co-host Ty.
There you go.